Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Sunday, November 16th, 2025, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and on a cold day up here on the mountain. And yesterday the sun was shining, it was in the lower 70s, and then a storm came in, it rained all night, and it's not raining right now, but the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. It's down in the lower 50s right now, and so like I always say, when you live in the mountains and you don't like the weather, you just wait a little while and it'll change. Well, as you can see, I'm out here in the van/recording studio, and this is going to be a Bigfoot video, and I'm going to talk about the Marlene Incident and give you an update on the Marlene Incident, because there's been some pretty amazing developments that have happened. And so if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, my first suggestion is going to be go back and watch my last 2 Bigfoot Stuff videos, and that'll bring you up to speed. But just as a quick recap, there's been quite a number of us that have had communication with the forest people, and we've got some other of our viewer friends who are mediums, and one particular one is a lady from Nevada, and for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to continue calling her Nevada. And she's actually, adjust my hat here a little bit, she's actually a medium who has been in contact with the departed for decades. And so she kind of opened our eyes a little bit to that aspect of it. And I'd originally kind of helped her make the connection between the difference in what she was doing and dealing with Sasquatch folks. And she'd been had Sasquatch folks talking to her, but she didn't really realize exactly what was happening. And anyway, that's not the purpose of this story. And then, of course, there's my friend from Utah, and I'm just going to call him Utah. And then from the last videos, I also have a friend from Michigan, and I'm just going to call her Michigan for right now. I got some other players, and I'll introduce you to them when the time comes. But basically, the backstory on this was Utah was out, and he got some kind of communication, and it didn't feel like the normal communication, the normal connection, or zap, if you will, or tingle. It felt odd. It felt different. And based on what he'd heard about in our dealings with Nevada, he started asking this entity that contacted him, and he said, "Are you one of the Sasquatch people?" And he didn't get an answer. And he said, "Are you the spirit of a dead human?" And he got a yes. Now let me sidebar here for just a second to talk a little bit about Mindspeak and how Mindspeak works. Mindspeak is not always a clear voice in your head. It can be, but it's not that way all the time. Sometimes it'll be just like a thought bomb that comes into your head out of nowhere, and a lot of times you can feel the connection. We call that the tingle. It's a neurological connection, and you can feel that connection. And when you ask a question, if the answer is yes, sometimes you get a little bit of a poke, like there. The connection will get stronger. If the answer to the question is no, then either you won't get anything at all, no response at all, or they might just totally disconnect briefly and then reconnect with you. And so the way we handle that, of course, is if we ask them a question, were you here last Wednesday? And we don't get an answer, then we'll rephrase the question. Okay, it's my understanding you were not here last Wednesday. Is that correct? Yes. So Utah refers to that as playing 20 questions, and it kind of is. They kind of communicate almost like a binary system where it's either yes or nothing. So you either got ones and zeros. But you can also, at times, you can get the very, very clear message in your head. So anyway, my friend from Utah, he communicating, and he asked if, are you the spirit of a dead person, of a dead human? Yes. What's your name? Marlene. Well, he was trying to, he was shocked to start with because that's the first time he'd experienced that, and then so he was trying to get information from Marlene, and she was able to give him two visuals, and the one visual that she gave him was a newspaper clipping, old newspaper looking, single column. And he was not able to read the story itself, but the little headline had something to do with missing person, and there was a picture there of a young woman that looked like it might have been a high school yearbook photo or something of that nature. And then she also gave him a visual of probably her walking down a rural highway and just walking along the road. And it was very clear, and he was able to get an idea of what she looked like and what she was wearing and all this kind of stuff. Well, he asked her, Utah is a pretty sharp guy, and so he asked her, he says, are you trying to cross over? Yes. Do you need help? Yes. I'll try to help you. And then she was gone. Well, he talked to Nevada, and Nevada, back and forth, she clarified what was probably going on there. And she actually tried reaching out, and she got some information. And the interesting information she got, because initially, maybe we watched too many crime shows, but we thought maybe that Marlene had been murdered. Well, Nevada found out that no, Marlene had not been murdered. She actually died of exposure. But there was a story behind that. And I'll get back to that part. Well, Nevada gave Utah a kind of a crash course on how to help people cross over. And Utah started trying to reach out to Marlene. And so finally, on the last full moon, I forget exactly when that was, it was a week and a half ago or so, that he actually was able to reach out to Marlene. She answered him, and he was able to talk her through the process and help her cross over to the other side. And it was quite dramatic, and it was pretty amazing. So of course he told me, he was keeping me in the loop and telling me about all this kind of stuff. Well, the same day that I put up that last video, which was back on November 7th, a little over a week ago, that morning I had a similar experience with a woman named Celeste. And I felt the same odd tingle, not like a Sasquatch tingle, but something totally different. Enough that, and you can tell the difference after a while when you've been doing this. And anyway, and I immediately asked Celeste if she was, I asked her what her name was, and she told me, of course. And then I asked her if she was looking to cross over, and she said she was, or said yes. And so then I asked her, can I ask you, how did you die? Plane crash. Okay, so I went through the process, and it didn't only took a couple minutes, and boom, it was over with. And apparently we helped Celeste cross as well. Well, later on that same morning, that happened in the middle of the night, and that had been on November 7th. Well, later on that same morning, Roheen reached out to me. Roheen's my teacher, and he's also Utah's teacher. And I asked him point blank, I said, did you guys have something to do with that? Yes. Did you arrange that? Yes. And so anyway, was that a test? Yes. And I should ask him if I passed. I think I did, but I never asked him that. So anyway, so that kind of brings you up to date where we were at the end of that last video. And there's been some interesting developments since then. Well, as part of when Utah had first talked to Marlene, he was trying to figure out where this had occurred at. And while he was talking to her, he was going through, he kind of felt like it was the upper Midwest. And so he was going through the various states. And when he said Illinois, he got a hit. She said yes. Well, then he asked about Wisconsin. Yes. Well, then, it couldn't be in both places, so he thought maybe there's a connection somehow. So maybe he's thinking northern Illinois, the Illinois-Wisconsin border area. Maybe she was, maybe she lived in Wisconsin and died in Illinois, or vice versa, or something. We didn't know. But it kind of took us up toward the northern Illinois area. And so anyway, after that, we started getting information, and I talked to another viewer friend / medium up in Michigan, and I'm going to call her Michigan. And she was able to kind of zero in and tell me a little bit more about it. Well, we were kind of got drawn somehow. We got drawn down to the southern part of Illinois, around Carbondale. And that's where we were at the end of that last video. And I think maybe what happened is that we were told that she died in the forest. And there's national forest land down there. And I don't know, maybe we were reaching out too much, but we thought we were making a connection between dying in the forest and dying in the national forest. But anyway, and then there was a couple other things that seemed like it connected it to the Carbondale area. So the very next day after that last video, so it would have been on November 8th, I got a text from a guy that had been working with for quite a while now in North Carolina. And I'm going to call him North Carolina. Well, he's not a medium. He's just a guy, and he lives in extreme western North Carolina, up in the mountains. And he lives on acreage, very rural area. And back when I first started talking with him, he had seen forest people on his land, on his property. And I helped him make contact with them, and he got names and everything. They've been living side by side ever since. He doesn't have a lot of contact with them, but every once in a while they make sure that they let him know he's there, that they're there, excuse me. So anyway, he texted me, and he said, Chuck, I don't know if this means anything, but when I was watching your last video, I got two names, mine speak, very clear. And one sounded like a person's name, and the other one was the name of a road. And the person's name he got was Chalmer. And the road was Dixon Heights Road. So I texted him back, and I thanked him very much, and I said, I'll see if I can follow up on that, see if it means anything. So the first thing I did, of course, I went down around Carbondale, and I started looking for Dixon Heights Road, and there is no such road in that area. So I broadened the search area out, and come up with two things. One of the things I came up with is there's a town in northern Illinois called Dixon that has a Heights Road, and there's also clear down in Alabama. There's a neighborhood in one of the bigger towns down there called Dixon Heights. And I looked all over that, looking for a Dixon Heights Road, and I didn't find one. Well, of course, I was telling Utah and Nevada about this, and Nevada came back, and she says, I think it has to do with Dixon. So we went back and looked at that. Well, there's a Heights Road in Dixon, Illinois, and it leads to a large city park called Lowell Park. It's a 200-acre, heavily wooded city park on the Rock River. It's on the northern side of the town of Dixon, Illinois. And so when Nevada she said she found that on Google Earth, and she says she went and we call it flying it, and looking at it on the satellite picture on Google Earth, and you kind of fly over it like an airplane. And she said when she did that, she got a hit. So I went and did it. And by golly, I got a hit as well. So I passed that information on to Michigan. Michigan, she went down there, and she flew it on Google Earth as well, and she got a hit. All right, now it starts getting a little more interesting. So she was also able, while she was there, had it on the screen of her computer looking at it, she got a visual of exactly what had happened down there, a little bit more than what we had. Now, we had been, Marlene had told Utah that she wasn't murdered. And Nevada had come up with the fact that no, she wasn't murdered. She died of exposure somehow. Well, Michigan was able to get a visual of her laying on the ground and the other people that were with her. There was a male and 2 other females. And she was unconscious laying on the ground. And the male kind of took his foot and pushed her body off into a ravine. And it wasn't a very deep ravine, but it's off down out of sight into a ravine. And and Michigan was able to get a very, very good description of what she was wearing. And lo and behold, it matched to the T exactly the visual that Utah had been given a week and a half, 2 weeks earlier. Exactly the same. Michigan was also able to kind of give a description of the guy, what he was wearing, and a description of his car. And the car wasn't it was a car, and it wasn't a real detailed description, but it was kind of like an old beat-up car. And so we got that. And so immediately, I started trying to zoom in on Dixon, Illinois. Now, I had also gotten a last name at one point, and I talked about that in the last video, but I didn't tell you what it was because I didn't want to, poison the water, if you will, with an idea. And since then, I got another last name. Well, the first last name I got was Zimmerman. And in trying to research that, looking for a Marlene Zimmerman, there is actually a current missing person, a 28-year-old female out of the state of Washington, up around Port Angeles. And her name is Marlene Zimmerman. And that's been all over the Seattle area news. And that's current. So I didn't think I thought maybe that's where I got that name, but I wasn't sure whether that name had anything to do with that. Well, also somewhere along the line, I got the name of Driscoll. Okay, so now we got 3 possible last names. We got Zimmerman, Driscoll, and Chalmer. Well, Michigan, when she had seen that visual of the guy pushing her off into the ravine, and she said she actually saw him. He used his left foot. She described the kind of shoes he was wearing. And she said that she thought his name began with a C, and his first name might have been Craig. Well, in the process of all this, I believe it was Nevada came back, and she said that, yes, he's no longer alive. And now we're thinking this dates way back, because initially, right in the very beginning, Utah was given the number 1970, and he wasn't sure at the time whether that was a year or not. But we're kind of thinking maybe it is. And Nevada had come up with another female's name that was apparently there, and that name was Candace. And Candace supposedly is still alive. And so, let me, the next thing is Michigan. She had occasion to talk to another friend of hers who's also a medium, and apparently he's been a medium for quite some time. And she asked him to look into that, and he did. And he came back with some more detail. And some pretty remarkable detail. And he told us where in the park the ravine was, and he said that it had been that there's a golf course there now that wasn't there then. And I looked at that area pretty close, and there was no golf course there. So I went back and looked at it again, and you know what's there? There's a a frisbee golf course there. And maybe that's what he was referring to. And that was most likely put in after this happened. Now, Utah had also asked forest people for their help on all this, and the forest people kind of said, well, you don't really need to do anything else. Your job's done here. You helped her cross over. That's all you really need to do. And then he was finally told that there were no remains left, that it washed into the river and were gone. There was nothing left. Because we were thinking about, the possibility of going in there with cadaver dogs and all that kind of stuff like that. So the so what the bottom line was anyway is that it wasn't Dixon Heights Road. It was Dixon, Heights Road that leads into one of the entrances to Lowell Park in Dixon, Illinois. So I reached out to the newspaper there, and I left a message. And so far, it's been over 10 days now, and nobody's responded back to me. And there might be a number of reasons for that. I mean, they're like most small town newspapers, they're understaffed, and and I may not have stated it properly or whatever, whatever reasoning behind that. They might have some big story they're working on, or they might have decided I was a crackpot and not worth their time, or and there was a dozen reasons why they might not reach out to me. But what I'll tell you here is that if any of you have any connection around that area, if you know somebody that's there, and somebody, especially somebody who's lived there for a long time, reach out to them. Now, let me tell you what, based on everything that I've got from all these sources, okay, and we're talking Utah, Nevada, Michigan 2, North Carolina. I kind of have an idea of what probably happened there. And there's no guarantee that I'm correct, but there is a kind of a scenario that I'm kind of working on. And what that scenario is that, first of all, that Marlene and this Candace knew each other. And that I believe came from Nevada. She told us that. And what probably happened is that Marlene was invited to go partying with him. And there was 3 women and 1 man. And that they went out to this park and they were drinking and doing drugs. And that Marlene overdosed and kind of wandered away. And when the others went to go find her, when they found her unconscious, laying on the ground, and they thought she was dead. Got scared, rolled her body off in the ravine, and left her there. It was probably because of the way she was dressed. She was not dressed in heavy clothing, but we got that she died of exposure. So that would lead me to indicate that it probably would have happened either in the spring or the fall when the days were kind of nice, but the nights got cold. And in her overdose state, she passed away. And subsequently, her body was lost and, eventually got washed away. The ravine most likely leads down to the river, and there's probably some flooding events between then and now. And so that's probably what happened. What I was trying to do is I was trying to see if the newspaper had a archive. And in newspaper jargon, they call it the morgue, where they keep all their old back issues, and if it had been digitized and if it was searchable. So my plan was to go and see if I could find that article, missing persons article. And if we could tie that together, that would give us a last name. And so we're pretty sure we know what happened. We're pretty sure we know where it happened. We're not sure of her last name. And we're also not sure of exactly when it happened. Now, Michigan 2 also told Michigan 1, who relayed it to me, was that Marlene's father is still alive, and that would make him pretty old. But said that he's a pretty disagreeable sort, and he drinks a lot. And so, it would be interesting. We don't know whether she had any siblings that, and since her, Marlene had told Utah initially that her body had never been recovered and that the police investigation had never gone anywhere. Well, that proves that, the fact that there was a newspaper article proves that somebody reported her as missing, because otherwise it wouldn't have been a news article. And there's a police report on it. And so I'm questioning how much more time that I really need to put into this. The forest people told us we don't need to do anything more. It's over with. And I think I mentioned that in the last video. But curiosity is, still lingers. And many of you reached out to me and said you were looking for this video just because you were curious if we could figure out what happened to Marlene. And we figured out a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about, I called North Carolina. I texted North Carolina, asking if he had time for a phone call. And after I found out all this. And so he said, sure. So I called him and I talked to him. And I told him where this investigation had gone. I didn't want him to see it in a video. I wanted him to hear it from me ahead of time. And tell you the truth, folks, he was totally blown away by all this because he said that was some of the clearest mind speak he'd ever gotten. And he got that very, very clearly. And he was just absolutely stunned that the direction this has gone. And we, like I say, we still don't know. And the scenario that I laid out for you may not be correct, but that's kind of what I think happened right now, based on everything that I've gotten from all the different sources. So once again, if you know anybody that in that area, and you know any mediums that are interested in trying to help us out with this, if they can reach out and try to get any information, go on Google Earth on the north side of Dixon, Illinois. Take a look at Lowell Park. See if you get a hit. We've had 4 people that have looked at that independently from 4 different parts of the country, and all of them got a hit on that. The only one that didn't was Utah. He went and looked at it and didn't get anything. So, but that, 4 out of 5 is pretty solid, I think. And so that's kind of where that one stands right now. So, no guarantees that we'll ever go anywhere with it. And, we're not going to change anything. We're not going to bring her back to life. But there's a possibility that we could, if we found somebody there that was interested in taking that on as a project and going to do the research on it, or remembered it. There's one more little sidebar about that I want to say before I go on to the next one. And that is that, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a history in Lowell Park of people seeing a ghostly figure of a young woman in that park? And if that dated back over 50 years, that there have been reports of that, and that was kind of a well-known thing in that area, that people had been seeing this ghostly apparition of a young woman in that park. Wouldn't that be cool? And wouldn't that tie that together? And I'm getting a tingle right now just saying that. And, maybe it wasn't a big enough deal that it's ever made any kind of big-time news story, but that might be a local legend around that town. And wouldn't that be interesting if that was true? If so, it's probably not going to happen again because Marlene is now crossed over. But if she remained in that park as a troubled soul for all those years, there might be some kind of a background story there too. Does this sound like one of those episodes of Dateline? Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? I think it's an interesting story. And it would be really interesting if we could fill in the last of the puzzle pieces and make this all work. And if I'm accurate, wouldn't that be cool? So now let me talk a little bit about Celeste. And I talked about how all I was getting was the little pokes for yes. And I only got 3 words from Celeste. 3 words in mind speak. One was her name. And the other one was plane crash. 3 words. Now, the morning that happened, when I started down the stairs, because that happened while I was still in bed, and when I started down the stairs, I got a name. And the name I got was Rodriguez. Well, I'm thinking about that. There's actually a news reporter for the Fox Channel 10 down in Phoenix who's been there for a long time, and her name is Celeste Rodriguez. And I think that might have been where that came from. And she's alive and well. So that, just that familiarity, that might have been that connection. So that probably doesn't have anything to do with anything. But that is the name that I got. So at the time, I had somehow thought that was right after that UPS cargo plane crashed in Louisville, Kentucky. And I somehow had the feeling that this was somehow connected to that. And so I waited until they released the names of all the people that died in that one. They released the flight crew's names right away. But of course, the people that were killed on the ground, the local authorities, they had to, do testing to make sure that's who it was and notify next of kin and all this kind of stuff. Well, it took them quite a while, but they finally released that list of names of all the people that were killed. And I went and looked at that, of course, and there was no Celeste on that. So I did a little bit of research on people named Celeste that died in airplane crashes, and there was one that dated back to 1975, and she died in a crash of an Air Force cargo plane. Now, the information I had didn't tell me whether she's an Air Force service member, or whether she was somehow riding on the plane for whatever reason. But that happened clear back in 1975. Another one of my viewer friends, and this is another lady from Utah, she forwarded down a clipping of a 13-year-old girl named Celeste, who had died in a plane crash in Montana along with her father, crash of a small plane. And that was dated back to 1983, I think it was. And she was 13 at the time. And the impression I got from my short conversation was that this Celeste was older than that. However, this lady, I guess we can call her Utah too, but she said that in her experience, and she's helped people cross over as well, she's a medium, she said that the spirits of young people age. And so when they come across, even though it's been years later, they come across more like adults than they do like kids. And so I don't know if this could possibly be that Celeste or not. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I'm not going to be obsessed with learning this. It's still kind of interesting. It'd be interesting to pursue it a little bit more. And if any of you have any information on that one, I'd be interested in hearing about that as well. But anyway, that's my update. And as you can tell, it's quite an interesting deal, an interesting story. And, I've been kind of putting on my investigator detective hat and trying to follow up on this a little bit. And so let me wrap this one up and tell you, as I always do, take care of each other, love each other, and take care of yourself, and show gratitude for what you have. If we were able to help these lost souls transition into the afterlife, that's pretty amazing. And so far, the forest people kind of told us, yeah, that is what it is, and they had a hand in it. And Roheen actually told Utah that they arranged the whole thing, and this was part of their teaching for he and I. And so if that was a test, I hope we passed it. Utah now, he's gotten interested enough in this that he's a veteran, and he actually went up to the veteran cemetery there in Salt Lake City and kind of wandered around there, and he said he got all kinds of tingles. And so he's wondering if maybe if somebody up there may need some help transitioning, and maybe he'd be able to help them. So that's kind of the angle that he's gone on. He said he's kind of gotten the hint that maybe that's kind of what the forest people want him to do. So he's kind of pursuing that a little bit. So I guess that's my story for today. And so until I come up with the next one, if I get any more information, I'll come up with another update on this. This is a fascinating story. It'd be worth a segment on 2020. I think it'd be, or 2020 or Dateline or one of those shows. So, but until I talk to you again on another one, let me just tell you, peace out.